All right. Good. All right, I have to turn it. We are now live on YouTube here. Okay. All right. I think I'll give myself a little light on this subject. Welcome everyone to Autistic Voices Roundtable Discussions, How Autistics Define Success. My name is Philip King Lowe. I am the owner, producer, and host for today's Autistic Moment, a podcast for autistic adults by an autistic adult. You can go to todaysautisticmoment.com for information and to find shows and that sort of thing. Autistic Voices Roundtable Discussions, they are a spinoff, a podcast, and that are produced 3 times a year. The purpose of Autistic Voices Roundtable Discussions is to bring together a group of autistics to have a discussion about topics that are about autistics. Many times the conversations that take place about autistics fail to invite and listen to the perspectives of autistics. Autistic Voices Roundtable Discussions is one way that we want to change that. This Autistic Voices Roundtable discussion is sponsored by Minnesota Independence College and Community and Looking Forward Life Coaching. Minnesota Independence College and Community is a life skills educational opportunity that helps young autistics and others with learning differences take a step toward their independence and a vibrant life. For more information, go to miccommunity.org. Looking Forward Life Coaching helps turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones towards success. Go to lookingforwardlc.org for more information. And thank you for your sponsorship and support. The inspiration for today's topic came from an interview I was having with one of our panelists, Carol Jane Whittington. During our conversation, Carol mentioned that success for autistics will look different because of our neurotype. Autistic defines success through our autistic identity and talents. This discussion is about how each of our panelists define success. So now we're going to get into the discussionary part. And so for my audience who is new to this, I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to, each of our panelists will have some time to talk about their answers. And we hope that you will enjoy this discussion. And please, by all means, this is being recorded and it will be, it will be available to listen to anytime you wish. So please feel free to come back and listen to it again and or share it. So let's start with the basics of asking our panelists to tell us their name and tell us a bit how they define success. So I'm going to let Carol go first, and then everybody else will follow. Go ahead, Carol.
That's a great question. It's one that I talk about quite often. How do you define success? I'm a burnout prevention and restoration strategist, specifically for minds of all kinds, because it isn't just our brains that are neurodistinct, it's also our bodies that are neurodistinct. And for most of us, we have a lot of co-occurring health conditions. We have a lot of trauma in our backgrounds, be that, micro or big T's and little T's. And all of that impacts our nervous system. It impacts how we show up in the world, because everything, especially in late identified life, comes from how have we experienced the world up to this point. And for a lot of us I went 40 years and didn't know I was autistic. I learned I was ADHD in my mid-20s. That really impacted how I saw myself because I didn't know, I knew I was different, but I didn't know why. And I didn't understand what that meant for me. So that indoctrination, that onboarding, that belief system that I had created around my life and myself was, I'm failing. I was not doing or performing as well as my peers. I wasn't doing it right, or I would try and do everything the way that I saw other people doing it, yet somehow I was still weird or not doing it well enough. And a lot of that perfectionism came in because my mom is almost 80 and she's late identified ADHD. And for her, I grew up with everything had to be perfect because perfection for so many of us means safety. If I don't make a mistake, then I'm safe. Whatever that safe might be. And so how I define success is I have to be perfect, because if I'm not safe. And so that's where I see so many clients come to me in burnout, be that from, a level 1 all the way up to a level 5 ghost pepper, from a poblano to a ghost pepper. And in that, it's the perfectionism. The way we've defined success is killing us. It's killing us because we didn't know. We didn't know that our brain worked differently. We didn't know our sensory system was taking everything in. We didn't know that we're in this constant state of nervous system dysregulation because of so many of these things. And most of us have put self-care to the side, or we've tried self-care, and the self-care looks like I'm unplugging every weekend so I can make it to Monday, because by Friday I'm so burnt out. I'm so overwhelmed with everything and I'm just freaking exhausted. So you're using all your vacation days, you're using your FMLA, or maybe you're also turning in your resignation because the job's killing you. When in essence, so much of that comes back to how have we defined success? And so where I went from perfectionism and everything had to be 100%, or I wasn't safe, or I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't worthy, which is a lot of the underlying current of that when we talk about success. Today is a very different thing. I'm going into four years of being shut down, burnout, and meltdown free for the first time in 40 years. I had my first burnout at the age of 6, and I stayed on that chronic cycle burnout loop for 40 years. And so today's success is very different. Before it was, I have to get everything right. I have to hit all these metrics. I have to check all these boxes. I have to own a house and have a car and a husband and kids and all this stuff, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing it right. I'm not adulting properly. And let's just say I don't even worry about how I adult today, because I am so far from what I think an adult is. I just turned 49. And it's success is, have a play today. Have I had a conversation with one of my amazing friends like AJ? Has she had a minute to spark joy with me? Have we in some way come together and had this great combustion of ideas? Like Philip and I had this great combustion of ideas that kind of led to this. Those things are what I define success through today. And every day is a little bit different, because what my capacity is every day is different. And that's okay.
Sounds good. Pass it out to the next person, please. All right.
Layla.
Yeah.
Hello, I am Layla. Pronouns are she, they. When I tried to look up in the dictionary, success had a very vague definition of reaching a desired outcome. And just for my life, that's ever changing all the time. And I'll go into some of my background, because right now I'm 27. But by the time I was 26, I had looked into a bunch of different conditions for the past 2 years prior, before hitting self-diagnosis. And I realized I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, I have auditory processing disorder, sensory processing disorder, depression, anxiety, CPTSD, all of those lovely conditions in one. And prior to that, I started my personal development journey in 2016. So even before looking into those conditions, I was already deep diving my special interest into personality types and just being more self-aware and generational trauma and all of these different topics of inner child healing and mindfulness. And so everything I did 7+ years ago eventually led to my self-diagnosis. I also have a bachelor's degree in communication. I had originally started in forensic science, but then I was also struggling throughout classes, wondering why I couldn't remember the same things that everyone else seemed to remember in an instant. And just as far as college and academics, I growing up, I was always the A, B student in high school and elementary. And then when I got to college, it just got way harder. And I noticed that I would spend like most of my day studying while all my other peers would take 1 to 2 hours and then understand it. And I realized that's probably not normal for me to just spend all nighters and 8+ hours a day just trying to study and remember stuff. Um, but ADHD fast going all over. But overall, right now, for my definition of success, I have an overall wheel. I drew myself. I don't know if you could see it.
Pull it back a little bit. There, we can see it.
So I made a wheel, and it was inspired from some business stuff that I did years ago, but I geared it to my life now. And in the wheel, there's 8 spokes or 8 lines. And each of those pieces of tire essentially stand for different things in my life that I found to be valuable that I want to focus on. So things like recreation, self-care, mindfulness, physical, interpersonal, my brand, neurodivergent inspector, financial and intellectual. And when I'm consistent, once a month, I'll grade myself on a 1 to 5 of how I did. The center of the wheel being a 0, and then the outside of it being 5. And right now, my success is more so focused on my recreational hobbies. So just like I mentioned earlier, my success is just always changing. You know, sometimes I could be focusing on my brand, and other times I'm focusing on family life, like with my dogs and my partner. So right now it's always changing, and I just have so many intersectional identities that I just don't try to limit myself to one definition of what success looks like, especially due to societal standards and expectations. I just don't even pay attention to what everyone else thinks should be looking like success at 27 as a female. And so, yeah, that's pretty much my notes. And I could pass that on to AJ.
Thank you. AJ Locascio. I am the founder and CEO of Umbrella Alliance US, which is the first chapter of Umbrella Alliance that we have our 501c3 status as a charitable organization. And so I'm just going to celebrate that. That's a big success for me because it's living in my values consensually in everyday life. Wow, I didn't expect that to be emotional, but it was. So yes. All right. Carol Jean, you said something earlier about success being so in our identity. And I'm having a really, I don't know, because I can't figure out what I'm feeling right now, but thank you. This is happy. This is happy. I know that there's some happy in there. Just a lot has happened in the last couple of weeks with announcing yesterday that Umbrella Alliance US is here and the work that we're doing. So yes, identity, that's a big piece of my identity, is doing this work that is really meaningful after 40 plus years of doing work that was maybe meaningful to other people, but it wasn't necessarily within my own zone of consent. And that was not success, even though everybody else said that it was success. Living my life to this gender standard of what it means to be a woman when I'm actually genderqueer and I don't fit that at all. Whether I'm wearing a dress or whether I'm wearing pants, it doesn't matter because my gender and my experience of that is within me. and my interactions. But I put this face on for the world in order to reach the levels of success that I needed to, because I couldn't do it when I lived outside of that, right? Somebody asked me just the other day, what does a neuronormative world look like for you? And I said, it's one with this pervasive attitude that the currently prescribed social norm of neurotypicality is viewed as the only acceptable way to be. That was really easy for me to just spew out, because it goes right alongside with heteronormativity, right? These two things they're intertwined. We were having a bit of a discussion before this, talking about how the trans community, the queer community in general, there's so much intersecting identities with that, and with neurodiversity, and with specifically identifying as neurodivergent and autistic. So for me, success really looks like being able to proudly, without worry, with the people who I care about, not all those other people out there, but with the people who I care about and who bring value and meaning to my life, being able to really truly be myself in those various intersecting identities that I have. You know, for most of my life, I looked like I had everything together and everything was beautiful and I was successful. I had the job, I had the money, I had the house, I had the husband, I had the kid, you know. But I wasn't successful to me because I did not have healthy, good, positive, meaningful relationships.
Hmm.
So for me, success is being able to do this thing that I'm doing, Umbrella Alliance US, working with my community, talking freely about wellness and sexuality and neurodiversity and intersectionality, and being able to maintain the relationships that are important to me, and build and nurture those at the same time without burning out.
Okay, Rose, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Rose. I'm 53 years old. And to me, success, I've come to find out, means figuring out who I am. For like we've heard, I've been living someone else's plan for like forever and completely, I'm sorry, screwing it up all the way through, if you want. I had, I was like, I'm gonna have the kids first, and like I'm getting married, I kid you not, for the first time at the age of 53, because I just do things my way. And it's when I really do things my way in my life that I feel like I'm top of the world, and that to me is success. And I wish everybody could live that. I mean, seriously, because I have the house and I love my house. Don't get me wrong. I have 4 kids. I adore my kids. They're all adults now, so they've kind of gone on. So it left me to go, okay, Rose, so what makes you happy now? And I don't drive because it's very difficult. Didn't finish any diploma. I don't have any diplomas. So I didn't have a career. So if you looked at it, I always said, if you look at the checklist of society, I wasn't getting any of those. I was like, yeah. And for the longest time, I was really sad. I was sad because I was like, I'm not giving to society. I'm not part of lifting up society and making it better, because my motto is, you leave things better than when you arrived. And so I felt useless. I mean, at least I was raising my kids, but that's it. My kids grew up, and it was a time to discover who I was, that society made me or told me that I was supposed to be, and getting away from that. What was my autistic side? How did my ADHD fit in all this? Because I was diagnosed like at 47. So I was like, oh, so I was learning a whole bunch of things about myself, and then also learning about who wasn't me, who I was told that I was supposed to be that. And when I started to tear that apart, and I started to go towards, funny enough, doing me imperfectly. So I didn't have to be perfect. It was almost the opposite. It was like, just do it, Rose, and it doesn't matter. And I've come to enjoy being imperfect, which is a big one. So I do it through my art. I be it painting. I'm still a perfectionist when it comes to writing and reading, so I'm still stuck there. But I'm really trying to find me and nurture that. If that's my success.
Very good. Yeah, those are all great answers. And it again speaks to our diversity as autistics, and that's what's important. I personally feel that success is when you can pull together all the wonderful things you are and use them to impact others in a way that makes a difference. And that's one of the reasons why I started today's autistic moment. Because for me, learning about the fact that I'm autistic and coming to terms with that was one thing. But as far as what happens with a lot of others that don't have resources like I've had, I wanted to give to the autistic community something by which they could have opportunities and resources, even, that sort of thing. So all that's great. All right, I'm moving on to the next question, which is really a good one. When you think of what success means for you, how does being autistic help you define that? And what I mean is that being autistic, I'm going to go back to something that David Gray Hammond said on a couple of shows ago of mine of today's autistic moment. That word disorder is a social construct that brings with it this message: there is something wrong with you. Okay. And what David Gray Hammond is often trying to say is, no, this is a new normal. This is a normal. Being autistic is normal. Okay. So, but just because we are, once again, that success is going to be different. So moving along to this, because I want to give all of you a chance to answer. How do you define it, and in what ways does being autistic help you do that? Layla, I'm going to have you go next. Go first. And then please pass it along to the next person when you're done.
Okay. I'd say, oh, that's such a great question. I guess the first note I want to bring up is I've learned throughout life that part of my success and how I define it is not being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So just embracing getting out of my comfort zone. I've known this for quite a while, just like the start of my personal development journey. But I saw a recent TikTok that I can't remember who the creator was, but she was quoting a psychologist and saying that, if you're not used to advocating for yourself, sometimes advocating for yourself can seem so aggressive. And if you're not used to saying something that's a differing opinion than like your parents, it seems like you're being disrespectful. And that's being what we're used to is the reason why we shouldn't stick with our comfort zone when it comes to success, because a lot of our achievements and happiness and growth can come from embracing getting out of that zone. And that's one thing I wanted to start off with. Another thing I had wanted to mention as part of my background is that I'm a person of color. And so I'm Filipino and Hispanic and some other ethnicities mixed into that. But I was raised in Hawaiian culture on like island life. But then I've also moved around to 7 different states, not in the military. We were just like pretty lower middle class. So we were struggling most of the way. But I'm also a first generation college graduate. And that was a struggle in itself. And for so long, I thought, what society teaches us is to get a good job and get good grades, and or well, whatever that I wrote it down. Go to high school and get good grades to graduate, to go to college and then get a good job. And then one of my personal goals before I realized I was autistic is to get a house before I was 30 and also create a family. And now that I'm aware that I'm autistic and I have all these other conditions that affect my way of thinking and the way I deal with things and interact with people, I don't believe in that pipeline anymore. It does well for other people, just not for me. And so right now, whatever I do to define the success, I ask myself a couple of questions. Does my actions progress in my wellness wheel that I drew out of like the 8 different spokes? And does that make me progress or regress from those aspects in my life? And then another question is, will my actions align with my intersectional identities and my values? And so I think being autistic as well, like things of, pattern recognition. When I'm in a slump and I have low energy days, I just cannot do the things I need to do, executive dysfunction. And once I'm able to set myself on the side, I could assess, hey, my patterns of this isn't aligning with the things I want in life, and knowing that pattern, figuring out a game plan to move on. And so, yeah, that's part of my notes. And I'll pass that on to Rose.
Thank you. It's funny, like we're so different, and yet there's so many things that I see that it connects. It's interesting how each one of us, what we've done with it, but it's still there. I'm the same way. I have, to me, success for me is finding answers, getting to the truth. I'm someone that's always like looking for, I guess, answers. And I too can see patterns. I mean, we're very strong in even figuring out, like I always tell people, okay, what do you need? They're like, this is the problem. Like, no, forget the problem for now. Telling me, what do you want to get to? And they're like, I want this. And I'm like, okay, now tell me what the problem is. And I've noticed that I do it backwards, but it's like, to me, it works. People are always like astonished. They're like, I don't understand why you did it that way. I'm like, well, I don't understand why you do it the other way. So we have like other ways of seeing things that I often, I say we're that missing tool that everybody's like, it doesn't fit, it doesn't hold together. And then you get this little L and you tighten a couple of things and everything's like, wow. Well, yeah, we're that L. Every once in a while we come in and we're like, yeah, it's there and there. So I know that is something that I've always like been able to do. And it brings me joy. It brings me a sense of joy because exactly, it's me. This is really all me. It's not something I learned. It's just, I mean, it is something I learned. All of that I've learned together, that's come through me. And now I put it out there. And that's when I feel successful, is when I'm able to bring together what I love, what I know, and put it into a project and be a part of it. I don't have to be like the top person. I don't have to be the front person. I just like being a part of it and being able to help. And so as long as I'm doing that, to me, that is my success. And maybe that's the other thing. I see things very simple, very logical. So even if I don't like it, if it needs to be done, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be happy, but I'm going to do it. So that too, I think, is in certain positions, it helps a lot, especially when you have ADHD and you're like, okay, your wedding's in 10 days, get off the internet, and the kitties are cute, but you're not gonna have kitties at the wedding. So I've had to also challenge myself, I guess, like you said, get out of your comfort zone and saying, Rose, I'm gonna mother myself a bit, which I didn't have growing up. So I'll go, hon, okay, can you just do this? And then you'll go see the kitties for like 5 minutes. So I've learned to be, I guess, mother myself, take care of, like you said, take care of me like I wish I had because I needed it at that point. So, and I still do. So I do it now. So that's my success right now.
Okay. Pass it on to the next person, please.
AJ.
Thank you. Um, so, you know, when I came out and really started talking about my queer identity publicly, I thought that was going to be the thing that helped me center and sit into this space of being accepted, I guess, is the word, right? We need to be accepted in who we are as our authentic selves. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna have this conversation out loud, out loud with the world. Um, and that didn't do it. It wasn't it wasn't everything. I had, you know, prior to that being diagnosed ADHD 24 years ago, um, that was a step in that discovery and that starting to be able to be a self advocate. Um, then the saying out loud the queer identity and my idea of healthy sexuality and stepping into that space of advocating for myself in that area as well as advocating for others, there was still something missing. And it clicked into place, as people like to say, when I discovered that I'm autistic. And I found this community of people who get get me.
Mm.
Um, whether they like it or not, they get me. I'm here. Um, but they also understand me, right?
Mhm.
And even though they may be very different from me and may be very have very, very different various experiences, they understand me. And so for me, understanding who I am as an autistic and how that intersection came in and married all of those different roads. We have all of it's an intersection, right? It's where all of those intersections kind of came together in this beautiful wonderland where being autistic is inclusive of all of that. And all of those um, are learning to be inclusive of autism.
Mm.
And so, because success for me is so relationship based and values based, that is key. Understanding me as an autistic human is key into me having the success that I define for myself, which may not be what others define, but it's mine. Carol
Good.
Jean.
Okay, well, I got a whole host of notes after coming behind the three of y'all. I mean, mic drop on the three of you, seriously. So, Layla, when you were talking about, stepping out of your comfort zone, I spent an entire year, and my entire motto, my mantra for the entire year was "Do it afraid." And it really went, and I did it with a good friend of mine. She and I partnered up because she was late identified too. And this was the very beginning of my business journey and where I started Mind Your Autistic Brain. And I thought, oh my gosh, I had gone 39 years and 10 months, not realizing why I felt so crappy about myself and why I was so confused about why people did what they did and didn't understand, or I'd communicate and it just didn't seem to make sense to other people. It was like I was speaking a foreign language in my own household. And she and I decided we were just going to do it afraid. And I remember thinking, I've been uncomfortable my whole dang life. Why don't I finally just do something uncomfortable that I actually want to do instead of what everybody else wants me to do? And success is not linear. Our life is not linear. Time is not linear. We try to make it this linear construct, but I can get into all the physics of that, but it's not. And for so many of us in late identified life, and especially even if you were identified early in your life, for most people that were even identified, when they come into the unveiling method to go, hey, I want to go from burnout to thriving. I am definitely flaming pepper over here. And I've been on the chronic cycle burnout loop for decades too. And I've fallen into the restoration illusion trap thinking I had was out of it, but I'd really only moved down the spicy scale. We have an identity crisis. And when we're talking about that aspect of it, it also plays into our definition of, are we successful as humans? And a really big breakthrough and a really big shift in my life when it comes to defining success was recognizing I'm already whole. I'm not broken. I'm not missing any parts or pieces. There isn't something I have to go do to earn my wholeness. I already am whole. And being able to look at my values, Rose, you touched on this, AJ and Layla, you all did. And my values, are they in alignment with how I'm showing up every day? And the fact that I can now say no. I was a yes, people pleasing individual in a lot of those, societal female norms that come in, like, oh, you've got to be the quote unquote good girl and you have to say yes and you can't let anybody down and you have to take care of everybody else before you can take care of yourself or you're selfish, right? That's killing us. That's keeping us in burnout. And being able to look at that and go, when I'm not aware of my basic human needs, and there's 30 of those suckers, folks, if you didn't know, and looking at those basic human needs and going, oh, well, that's what's being met. These are the things that are unmet. This is kind of like the critical linchpin of an unmet need. If we're looking at that 80-20, when I look at burnout restoration with clients, it's like, let's look at that list and figure out what is the really important need for you in this season of your life, because it's going to change. What's going to have the biggest impact on how you feel? Because when we have a gap between our values, our internal life and who we know we are and how we are actually showing up in the world, be that's masking or camouflaging, masking to the professional level of camouflaging, and I was a chameleon. The larger that gap between who we know ourselves to be and how we show up in the world, it's a huge energy vortex. That's draining and that's exhausting. And, we all have these beautiful autistic traits and skills and characteristics and however you want to term it, whatever word works for you. And I'd never looked at, I knew I was good at certain things. And people would say, oh, you're so good at this. Will you come do this? And I'd go do it, but it wasn't something I enjoyed. And, a lot of times success, we get caught in this place. And a lot of you guys have mentioned this in the conversation today. We get caught in this place of, I'm just doing what everybody else wanted. And that was defining success because I was quote unquote good at it, but it wasn't necessarily something that sparked my joy, right? It wasn't something I was passionate about that lit me up, that was in alignment with me. But I did it because we've got this feedback of punishment and reward as humans. And it's either, I want to get the reward and I want to avoid the punishment. And for so many of us, our neurotype plays into how we are avoiding punishment because it hurts. It is not feeling good. And we feel bad about ourselves when we don't do it. And we want the reward because we want to feel like we're belonging, like we're part of the group, that we're being acknowledged. And just kind of wrap this up, I think the biggest thing in one of the traits, some of the traits or the characteristics or strengths that I have as an autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dyscalculia, you name all the stuff, POTS and hypermobility and all the things that I am. Okay, great. If we want to put labels on it, it helped me. I needed labels. I did to understand me and go, I'm okay. I'm not broken. But in that, I have an amazing ability to explore without judgment. I'm a great scientist. My background in vision science, it really, I think, comes to the front every day, but also my relationship to myself and allowing the strengths that I have to embrace where I have challenges and to not judge myself. Because I got a spiky profile like nobody's business. I'm so super good at stuff, and then I really suck at other things. It just doesn't come easily for me. And where I would beat myself up, thinking I was failing and not succeeding in those areas, having self-compassion, knowing that I'm whole, and that just because I suck at something doesn't mean I can't pay somebody else to do it or voluntold somebody else in my life to do it or outsource it in some way, that doesn't make me a failure. I personally think I am now the chief empowerment officer in my life. I am the CEO and not the chief everything officer. So, if you got a spiky profile and part of your maybe catch that keeps getting you stuck about how you feel about your own success, for the stuff that you're not great at, it's okay. You can outsource it.
Mm. Yeah. All right. To my panelists, I realized that questions 3 and 4 are kind of the same question, so I'm kind of going to merge them together a little bit. You know, I remember on one of my earliest shows, one of the things that I had said is that I found that as I learned more about my autistic self, that I can't think or behave or do like a neurotypical person does, because I'm not. You know, I think a lot of us, especially if we're late diagnosed or late identified, I like your word, Carol, identified. But the point is that until we're identified, we mask as if we're trying to fit into a world that we're not even made for. But once I found that I was diagnosed, identified, and the more comfortable I became with that identity, I discovered that I can't think like a neurotypical person does. You know, I've talked a lot about this on my show the past 3 weeks. I do believe there is an autistic culture. There is an autistic culture. There is an autistic language. Yes, it does exist. Thinking on that, though, can any of you talk a little bit about in what ways do you think we autistics define success differently than, say, our neurotypical peers? You know, and I'm going to give you an idea from an answer of my own, and then I'm going to let you all answer. I think we define success based on the things that we can do, even though the neurotypical world says we can't. You know, we may not have be interested in absolutely everything, but that those few things that we do have special interest in, we do extremely well. And there are neurotypicals that probably can't say that. You know what I mean? So going off of that, and again, let's talk a little bit about that. Rose, go ahead. You start, and then pass it off to the next person, please.
That's a great question. My mind's like whirling around, trying to figure out what I'm going to answer with.
Yeah,
I've known that I can't think like a neurotypical because every time neurotypicals are having this discussion, I always have the same expression on my face, which is, what the hell are they talking about? So, and I'm very expressive. So they're all looking at me like, what? And I was like, I don't know. I don't even know where to start. So, and because of that, I became very, I don't think I ever masked much. Just because, like I said, my face has its own ideas, so I can't do it. But I did become an observer of the world instead. I wasn't the chameleon. I was the invisible woman. Okay, I did not want to be seen. I did not want to be doing. It's like, if I did what everybody else was doing, I knew I was going to screw up somehow. So I would rather do it last, where everybody had already left the class, so I could screw up by myself if it did happen that way, which it rarely did. But to me, it seemed like it always did. So, so I've learned to be, I guess success for us is different because, one thing, we're not privileged when it comes to education as autists. We're not privileged when it comes to, let's say, social outings. They're not made for autistic people. So we've had a lot of disadvantages for a lot of things. And I think that created a self of, you've got your corner, you've got your space, you've got your place. I think a lot of us have accepted that. So success is saying, no, there's a place for me. You might not have seen it, but I'm going to show you where it is. And it's right beside you, maybe in front of you. And so, and I think that was it, is that our society, the way it was set up, we had to figure out our own stuff. A lot of it we had to figure out. And hopefully a lot of us had a good friend that we could like turn over and go, what are they talking about? And she would tell you what, or they would tell you what you're talking. And you're like, okay, so you kind of like went through and then figure out that, yeah, that wasn't for me anyway. I wouldn't have been interested in being or repeating that, I'm going to give you an example. When I was in grade 5, I went to a new school and there was a group of girls who hung together and they all wore the same jean jacket. And if you wanted to hang with them, you had to wear that jean jacket. That made zero sense to me. It's like, okay, it's like, if I don't have the jean jacket, do you disappear and I can't see you speaking another language? And it was like, I'll wear a jean jacket, but I don't want to wear it because I want to wear it with you guys. It's like, yeah. So I was never able to go along. And I think that's a strength in me because I'm very, I'm always looking for something different. And so I think autistics, we had to do that. We had to figure out, how do I learn? Well, not studying for 10 hours, but like, what's my best way to learn things quickly? So we've given ourselves so many tools because we didn't have them. And so we became self-sufficient. So there's a lot of success in there. It's just learning that when we're going to use our strengths, it's probably not going to look like what society has called normal.
Yeah, I think what I just heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but once you discovered that that corner of yours was actually a success, you no longer thought of it as a defeat.
Exactly.
Yes, because
Yes,
that's how I feel too.
Exactly. That's why you're like, wait a minute. Like when I said I'm a writer, it took me years. I've had things published and I would not say I was a writer. I would not say it because my writing level wasn't, Stephen King kind of thing, So I had to go, no, Rose, your poetry, your short stories they're a success. You did what you were supposed to do, which was write it. People like it. People read it. It's become a plus in the world. It's a success. And that's where I had to, but we always said, that was where you're supposed to go. So learning another way. That's it. That's success. And I'm going to say, who was it? Carol Jean.
Yeah.
Again, I made notes because you guys are like hitting so many great points. I'm just like jotted down because I know I won't remember because I'm so caught in following what you're saying. So that's how I track, right? But we're talking about in a lot of ways, and this was a big realization for me. It's that I had lived my life defining success and my own worthiness and value and place in the world, my own identity based on everything external. Everything was external.
Mm-hmm.
At 42, when I started my restoration journey out of burnout, I had been identified 2 years earlier, and my son had at the same time. So I was like, well, heck, if I was missed, because they told me, hey, you were missed. And I'm like, no, I wasn't missed. I'm right here, a very logical, literal person. And he's like, you need to come back and see me. But I had never even asked myself, what do I like? What does my perfect day look like? I had always done it from an external place of what would everybody else think a perfect day would look like. And then I'm going to do that because somehow then maybe I might get something from that. I had not learned to live from the inside out internally. And living in that external place, this talks about a lot of, the jean jacket, because I remember the jean jacket in 6th grade was a really big deal because I'm 49. You and I are in that same kind of bracket right there. And I remember that jean jacket being really important. And I had to get one of those Levi's jean jackets so that I could, skirt behind the group. But it was the comparison that became the thief of my joy, the thief of my own exploration of myself. And that shift in late identified life has given me compassionate curiosity about me for the first time. I was always curious and wanted to know more about everybody else because I was trying to figure out, what do you do? What do you say? How do you act? How do you navigate life so that I'm safe and I don't make mistakes and you don't make fun of me and you're not mean to me and I don't get left out, because that feels awful. And I think too, one of the things I started to notice in differences when we talk about, external versus internal is, I think for so many of us, I'm an Enneagram 5. I don't know if you guys know anything about that, but I'm an Enneagram 5. I'm a disc I, all the different stuff. I'm very cerebral. I'm a thinker. I'm going to think about something, even though I might feel it. And I think most people that I talk to, and I talk to thousands of people every week that come through to say, hey, I'm in burnout. I need some help. And, they go through and I say, okay, let's figure out what's happening. I've identified, and this seems to be really kind of a common experience. It's not for everybody, but most of us, we tend to have that cerebral sort of logical approach first. Like, let me figure this out, even though simultaneously we're feeling like all the big emotions and feelings, like we feeling them in our body, right? But we just hadn't quite got to the transcribing them into our mind part. And I think when we talk about and look at, because I also do a lot of coaching around neurodiverse communication in the ecosystem, specifically, how do we as different brains communicate with one another in relationships of all kinds? And it's neurotypical brains and bodies tend to go for the feeling, the emotion first. Like, how is this person making me feel? How is this experience or this environment making me feel? They translate that into their mind, and then they go logic from there. And we approach this from a neurotype perspective from these two different places. And so we tend to have these misconnects and these conflicts in communication that happen. Now, personally, I am of the opinion that we are the majority in the world. And since humanity has existed, we have existed. Our neurotype has. We are a natural part of humanity. It isn't something that just sprung up all of a sudden, folks. It wasn't just like somebody decided to go, oh, hey, there's a different neurotype in the world, and we're the normal ones and you're the weird ones. Because personally, I think our neurotype is the best, but hey, I'm a little partial. But when we talk about these things, we've got to kind of look at, well, we do approach the world and life differently. We do approach what success is differently. And I think when we can start with the internal piece, what does success mean to me? Because when I was in burnout and going through restoration, some days it was the fact that I got up out of the bed and maybe even went to the bathroom. Much sure as hell didn't brush my teeth because that was sensory hell. But how do we do this?
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jean. Carol. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. Layla, how about you take us to the next one?
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. I feel like one way that, I guess I wouldn't speak for all autistics, but I know there's a large part of autistics who would sort of agree. But when it comes to defining success, we don't focus on things like how high we are on the corporate ladder, or hierarchy, that word, and like financials, like economics wise, like how much money I have means I'm more successful. And I don't believe in that whole like social hierarchy of like, well, I have more of this, so I am more compared to you. It just didn't make sense to me growing up. Like, you're still a person, and that doesn't allow you to be rude. And another thing is that it's not like this or that type of definition of success. It's like what we talked about today. It's very personal to that person. And just like normal human beings, we're all diverse and unique in our own way. And so that should be played into when we think about our definition for success. Things like, mental health and energy, and like everything we have going on outside of ourselves, so like family or pets or children. And even comparing our success definitions to like the generations before us. To my mom, my parents, my biological parents did not graduate from high school. And my dad, who I call now technically stepdad, he graduated high school and went to the military, and like all of their definitions was very different because, diversity and unique experiences. And just the fact that I was able to graduate college was a different milestone than the people before me have never even thought was an option because of finances and things and having to work to help family at a young age. So like how I think there's Rose that mentioned, like we're trying to figure this out ourselves as autistics. and steer away from what neurotypicals believe to be a success, because it's more, I feel like it can be more materialistic and more on social status versus what is good for me right now. And it's another note is accepting that it's different for everyone. I've had many people throughout my life as I moved around all these different states, like, no, you should do this or you should do that. And I'm like, you're basically telling me what I should do based off of one little picture you've seen out of my entire life. I know myself best, so I'm not going to do that. If that's the approach you take, like, I love that for you, but that's not going to help me at all.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think those are, let me see if I have any more notes. Another thing I've noticed with, I don't know if it's neurotypical or just the society standard, but if we don't reach a certain goal, we're considered lazy. Back a few years ago when I got swooped into a multi-level marketing business who I'm no longer affiliated with, but it was a very big start to my personal development journey. A lot of the reasons why they would ask me, like, no, why can't you do this? And why can't you do that? Are you just not believing in yourself as much as you should? Do you not have confidence in yourself? Are you just lazy? And I'm like, before I realized I was autistic and ADHD and executive dysfunction was a thing, in my mind, I'm like, that's not it at all. And you just seem like you're trying to fill the gaps for me. But now once I realized, I'm neurodivergent, like that just ties into so many things where it's just, I can do those things, but my brain and my body won't let me do it. I'm just frozen. So yeah, either way, I think the overall note is success is different for everyone based on their specific needs and support needs and preferences. And that's just fine. And then I'll pass it to AJ.
AJ. And everybody stay around for a little bit because I have an important announcement related to what we're talking about. Go ahead, AJ.
Thank you. So Layla, you said accepting that everybody is different. And if I have to look and say, how do I, as an autistic human, define success differently than somebody who is not? It's because I expect that everybody is different. And the way that I live my life and focus on other people is that I believe that deep down. To me, that's logical and that makes sense because we're humans and we're, every single moment of every single day, our cells are changing, not just physically, but the energy surrounding us, all of that is changing. And therefore, from one moment to the next, people are going to be different. So to expect us to all be the same, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think as autistics, that's normal to us. That doesn't feel, we don't have to work to learn that. We don't have to try. We don't have to try to understand and be accepting because it's just, okay, that's a person and I'm a person and that's what we have in common. Therefore, we're both okay, cool. Until somebody does something that hurts us and then we start realizing, okay, maybe that's not a safe person and we have to learn those things. So for me, I think maybe that's just that justice perspective that so many of us have that seems to be something that has to be learned from people who are not like us.
Well, those were all really great answers, so very well done. Before we conclude, I want to tell you that if you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we have, there's one more conversation I want you to invite you all to hear. On June 4th, on today's Autistic Moment, is going to be what successfully autistic and queer really means with Dr. Devin Price, who is the author of Unmasking Autism, Discovering the New Faces of Neurodiversity, and laziness does not exist. Let me tell you, if you have not had a conversation with Dr. Devin Price, you will thoroughly enjoy listening to Devin. Devin brings together both his I hope forgive me for the gender pronouns here, Devin, but Devin brings together their personal experience and their professionalism all in one. And allow me to say, you will truly enjoy listening to Devin. Because when most people hear the words successfully and queer, they digress to what those words mean from a neurotypical, ableist, and straight point of view without all the rest. Well, Dr. Devin Price is going to talk about what it means for them and what it can really mean for those of us. Because June, of course, is LGBTQ Pride Month. And I always try to have one show, at least, if not two, about Pride. I want to conclude this Autistic Voices Roundtable discussion for those who have not heard me. If you've heard me say this on today's Autistic Moment, good. And even if you have, I have a great deal of concern of the many bills that have been passed throughout the United States that are prohibiting gender affirming care for trans youth and that sort of thing, because of how many are also autistic. In my most recent show, Unmasking Our Authentic Autistic Selves, you will hear Eric Garcia say that the problem with these things is that they are basically saying that autistics and trans people are, quote, not competent enough to make our own health decisions. And that is why I stand firmly against that sort of thing. One thing I hope that everybody takes away from this is that from the four amazing panelists who have been here and all the amazing guests that I've had on today's Autistic Moment, autistics are very competent at what we do. We all come to our autistic life from our journeys. The journey before we're diagnosed, the one after we're diagnosed. Some of us were diagnosed, identified early in life, some later in life. I was diagnosed when I was 42. The point is that just because we struggle to define success doesn't mean we're not defining it. And the thing is, our success will look different because being autistic is not the same. And what I want us to continue to get the message across, just because we're different, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Okay. And that because we're autistic, we are different, and we bring forth a success through that difference. If we could stop looking at difference as a defeat, look at difference as a success, we would indeed be changing how the world understands autistic and other neurodivergent people. So I want to thank all of my panelists who have been here. I also want to very much thank those who are watching. And once again, this show will remain available for you to watch anytime you like. You can watch and share it from @Today's Autistic Moment on YouTube. And as I've said, you can always go to todaysautisticmoment.com to listen to the show and get information and all that. So thank you so much for being here today. And at this point in time, I'm going to stop the live stream and spend some time and saying thank you and